What is going on, everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. I want to thank you guys for joining me for another replay battle, and today I have something very special for you. I've had many requests over the many years that I've been running my channel for more historical battles from the First Age, and I was lucky enough to receive a scenario last week based on the conflicts of Middle-earth's ancient past. So without any further jabbering, I present to you the Siege of the Hill of Himring. Before we tackle the story behind this battle, let me go over a few rules laid down by the scenario creator Al-Hassan. First is that the out-companies, that is the forces defending the walls and beyond, are only able to retreat 3 units of their choosing. The rest must hold their ground as long as they are able. Second is that the Mordor Army spawning inside the city must wait until the walls have been taken before aiding their allies. And that's all there is in terms of rules of conduct. Let's take a look at the story. Himring was a hill in northeastern Beleriand. Nestled between the pass of Aglon and west of Maglor's Gap, Himring was the greatest hill in that region. It was wide, treeless, with a flattened summit, and surrounded by numerous smaller hills. Himring's great height and significant defensive positioning made it a natural fortress, and so, once King Eluthengol of Doriath expelled the Noldor from his realm following his discovery of the kinslaying at Alqualonde, Himring was made into a stronghold of Maedhros, eldest son of Feanor. From atop Himring, the sons of Feanor would guard the eastern marches of Thangorodrim, the fortress of the Dark Lord Melkor, until the Nirnaeth Arnothiad broke most of the Noldor's remaining might in the north of Beleriand, and the ancient fortress of Himring was abandoned. In today's scenario, which was created and sent to me by Al-Hassan, by the way, so I'd like to extend a big thank you to him for the support that he's shown the channel. We'll be pitting 3 armies of the Elves of Lindon, playing the part of Maedhros' Noldoran garrison, against the might of Mordor, Gundabad, and the Misty Mountains, representing Morgoth's iron-shod legions from the depths of Thangorodrim. With all that having been said, let's take a look at the army comps. Now, as per usual, we will begin with the defenders, and then we'll make our way over to the attacking armies. So the first army we're going to look at today is one of the armies of Lindon. It has the dubious distinction of being the first line of defense against the overwhelming force of the armies of Thangorodrim. We have Lindon being commanded by War Lango, and he's got a pretty decent army, actually. He's got a couple units of Mithlond Pikemen, I believe 2 or 3 units of Mithlond Pikemen, who are very elite. Normally, you will only ever be bringing 2 of them. A lot of Harlandon infantry, 5 or 6 units of Harlandon infantry, I believe 3 or 4 units of the Harlandon Guard, 1 here, and I think there's 3 on the other end as well. He's also got some Noldoran Blade Masters right here, some Wardens of Elastirion, who are one of the best ranger units in the game, and damn do they do a lot of damage in this battle. Wait till you guys see the amount of kills that these units can rack up in the right circumstances. And he's going to be following them back along with his Blade Masters and a unit of the Elite Mithlond Pikes inside the city. So these are going to be the 3 picks for the out companies to retreat inside of the walls. Over here we got some more Mithlond Pikes, more Harlandon infantry, yet another company here of the Harlandon Guard, and another company of Harlandon Guard, and yes, the 4th company of Harlandon Guard. Very, very strong ranged units. They've got Elven Accuracy and Elven Damage. They are very lightly armored, but they do have really strong shield values for an archer unit that doesn't use their shield while firing, I believe, to the tune of about 5 shield value. So against human archers, for example, most of the human archers in the game tend to fall around the 5 to 6 damage range. These guys are going to do very well in that kind of situation. More Harlandon infantry, and that's basically it for the out companies. Let's go ahead and let's move on to the second defending army. We have the forces of Al-Hassan, the creator of this scenario. And he's got some Lindon Pikemen here, manning this breach, a unit of Wardens of Harlandon, who are going to be getting a little bit of a buff in the hotfix. They currently have shields, but they don't actually have a shield value, and that is my bad. I thought that they didn't use their shields, but indeed they do. So they will be getting, I believe, 3 shield value because they don't use it while they fire, so it gets cut in half. So they're going to be getting a little bit of a survivability buff, but in any case, yes, 1 unit of the Harlandon Wardens. I can't seem to stop myself from talking about hotfixes and things like that. I'm just really excited about the development, so yeah, forgive me permit me this small indulgence. In any case, Alisan's got some Harlenon infantry. Mithlon Marines, love the Mithlon Marines. One of my favorite units for Lindon. I love the way that they look. I know the helmets are a little bit controversial amongst people, but I happen to love them. And I love the shield retextures. I think that were done by Arthalion, and the retextures in general for most of the Lindon faction that were done by Cowering Coma. They look gorgeous. Over here we got some Harlenon infantry, more Harlenon infantry, and shocking, yet more Harlenon infantry. Moving on over to this side, I believe Alisan has a couple units of Noldoran Guard, who I love. I love the Noldoran Guard. The work was done by Arthalion. I believe he's reskinned the entire Lindon faction for DAC, who have a very different approach to Lindon than the Reforged team. So if you guys enjoy Arthalion's work, you can see more of it in the DAC 2.1, which I believe just came out. Over here we have a unit of Noldoran Horse Lords. I think this is where Alisan's general is going to be. Let's see if we can find Círdan. Yes, indeed, he is right there, mounted up with the rest of his bodyguard, charging out into the field to make a nuisance of himself. Mithlon Pikes here from Alisan. Unit of Mithlon Swordmasters, 2 of them, in fact. Love these guys as well. It's the Mithlon units, the textures that they have for them. I really, really enjoy them. Up on the walls, we've got, I believe, 1, 2, 3 units of Harlenon Guard. And over on the other side, we've got another 3 archer companies, 1 unit of the Wardens of Elastirion, and a couple units of 4 Lindon archers, and they are well placed on the battlements to support the out companies. So the forces of Morgoth not going to have an easy time of it when it comes to forcing their way through the Citadel. Into the Citadel, I should say. Alisan also has a catapult unit right there. So let's move on now to the third and final defending army, this one being commanded by Grimgor Ironhide. He's got some Noldoran Blade Masters, Harlenon Guard, more Noldoran Guard. I can't help but stop on these guys every time. God, they are cool. Absolutely, very much enamored with them. Grimgor Ironhide also has a little bit of cavalry here. He's got some 4 Lindon Scouts, more Harlenon Guard, more Mithlon Pikemen, more Harlenon Guard, some Harlenon Infantry, and yet more Mithlon Pikemen. So there's a lot of overlap amongst the Lindon rosters here, just because there's only so many things that you can really bring with them. The roster is not exactly gigantic. But in any case, that does it for the defenders. Let's go ahead and let's see what Morgoth and his armies have brought to the battle today. Beginning on the attacking left and sweeping eastward, we have the forces of the Misty Mountains being commanded by Engsfitz. I think that's how you pronounce that. I don't know. He's in a lot of these scenarios, though. Seems to be an experienced player. He's got some Goblin Heavy Archers, Goblin Spears, Heavy Goblin Spears, I should say, who are AP, by the way. Absolutely a scary, scary spear unit. They are, in a lot of ways, like the Southron Warband, but more numerous and better armored. Definitely don't want to play around with these guys. They will wreck your life. More Heavy Goblin Archers, some Heavy Goblin Infantry, who are kind of just okay. Mostly they make up for their small stature and general weakness with their large numbers and low price tag. More Heavy Goblin Archers over here. White Uruk Fearmongers, which I know a lot of people are very enamored with, and I can't blame you. I love the look of these guys, and yeah, not quite as crisp as they would normally be. I actually had to turn down my graphics for this battle because it's too damn huge. But yeah, White Uruk Fearmongers here to the tune of 2 units. A very deadly halberd unit. They're going to be limited to 1, however, next patch, and or next hotfix, and look at some other changes as well. Heavy Goblin Crossbows, Snow Trolls, who not only have a shield value, which is fairly unique among trolls. There's only, I believe, 1 other unit that has shields as a troll unit, but they're speedy. They are the fastest trolls, I believe, in the game, so they're great for messing with cavalry and things like that. Over here we have some Black Uruks of the Mountain, a very strong second line. These guys are going to be losing their fear ability next patch. That's going to be shifted onto the White Uruk Fearmongers. Got some Mountain Uruk Blades, who previously were available to the Misty Mountains as kind of a halfway house between the Heavy Goblin Infantry and the Black Uruks of the Mountains, but they have since been removed from the faction for, I'm not too sure what the reasoning was behind that. I wasn't actually in charge of that. And then finally we have the Goblin King's Bodyguard, who, very similar to the Goblin Infantry, but they are kicked up to 11. They've got multiple HP, I believe 8 armor, a ton of damage, and some fairly respectable melee defense as well, to the tune of about 12. So against most melee and infantry, they're going to do very, very well. Over here we have one of the attacking Mordor armies, this one being commanded by War Sereg. He's got some Orc Fodder, yet more Orc Fodder, a lot of Moranon Heavy Maulers, who are an excellent shock unit. They are a little bit more heavily armored, I believe, than most average Orc units, but of course, with those gigantic, absurdly oversized axes, they have AP and a really nasty charge bonus as well. Over here we got some Moranon Archers, who I love the look of. I believe this is Jocks, one of the He's just a modder. I believe he's actually working on the Rise of Mordor team, but he does or did a lot of work for 3rd Age in general. This is exactly what I would expect the Iron Legions of Thangordrim to look like. Absolutely love this model. So yeah, excellent work there. Mordor Guard. I believe there's a ton of Mordor Guard here backing up some halberds or something like that. Some more Mordor heavy maulers. Yet more Mordor archers. Mordor infantry using that same gorgeous model as the archers. Yet more Mordor infantry. The really cool looking officers here, which I believe are done by Kuroguro-chan, and they're based on the Black Legion units. Got some Sauron's Will in the back here. Deadly AP unit. Minas Morgul Chosen, good at holding a line. Some Olokai, and of course the Melkor's Chosen, who are arguably one of the scariest war units in the game currently. They've got a little bit less damage, I believe, than the Champions of the White Hand, but they've got way more survivability with their shields and with their Numenorian bonuses and things like that. Moving on to the Orcs of Gundabad, being commanded by Rico Brun. He's got some Trolls of Angmar here. One of the only... Yeah, this is the second Troll unit that has a shield. I believe there's just them and the Snow Trolls. Very, very deadly. A little bit expensive, though. Witch Realm Hammerguard, again, a very expensive unit. 2 HP, AP, everything you'd ever want in a shock unit. Got some Blackwatch Legion here. Excellent at pushing a line. They're going to be getting a little bit of a numbers reduction in the next patch. And, of course, we have the Orc Marauders. Many Orc Marauders here for Rico Brun. 4 or 5 units of them, making up his main line. Also got a couple units of the Witch Realm Pikemen for Angmar, who are well-armored and high-damage pikes. Very, very deadly. Got some Orc Fellers here. Some kind of run-of-the-mill shock infantry. They do their job all right, but they'll fall away pretty quickly. We've got a catapult unit here. One of the only attacking catapult units. Actually, I think that is the only attacking artillery piece, which is a good thing. Too many artillery pieces for the attackers in a scenario like this where the defenders are horribly outnumbered. It really does unbalance the scenario very heavily in favor of the attacking forces. Over here we have the final... Actually, no, this is the second Mordor Army, this one being commanded by Arcturus. He's got some Moron halberds. Actually, they're just Moron halberds now, thank God, because I can never say that properly 10 times in a video. And they're all in defensive formation. It looks like they were maybe expecting a sally or something from the Elves of Lindon. Don't know, I don't think they knew just how much cavalry the Elves of Lindon have. I got some Mountain Trolls here, kind of your run-of-the-mill troll unit, certainly the most numerous, but also one of the weakest next to the Drummer Trolls and the Troll Catapult units. Got some Mornon Guard here. Pretty decent spearmen. They'll do the job. They make up for their weakness with numbers. Mornon Archers, a lot of Mornon Archers here. And some Mornon Infantry. And the Black Legion of Barad-dûr, who are really cool, actually. They operate along more or less the same lines as the Blackwatch Legion, but they're a little bit weaker. I think they have more numbers, however, to kind of compensate for that. And they don't have quite so much mass. So they don't push quite so hard as the Blackwatch Legion, and they don't have the shield values, certainly, that the Blackwatch Legion have. But it is nice for Mordor in siege battles and in field battles as well for breaking through enemy lines and just stiff defending choke points. Over here we have a Minas Morgul Bodyguard, which is the just your regular kind of Uruk bodyguard, but they've been given an interesting reskin that kind of singles them out from the rest of the army there by the Reforged team. Some more Mordor infantry, yet more Mordor infantry, and the Dismounted Temple Inquisitors, which is a fairly anomalous unit to have in a first age game, because the Black Numenorians, and indeed Numenorians in general, were not a thing until the end of the first age, when they were gifted the land of Numenor off the coast of what used to be Beleriand by the Valor, and by, I believe, also Eru himself. But whatever. I guess Alysanne thought that they maybe needed them to help them push, and just in general for the balance of the scenario. So yeah, they're here. Deal with it. Minas Morgul Chosen, Sauron's Will to the tune of 2 units, and that does it for the 4 attacking armies outside of the walls. Let's take a look at the 5th and final Mordor attacking army, which spawns inside of the Citadel. Now remember, these guys are not allowed to move in until after the attackers on the outside of the walls have breached into the city and have thoroughly gotten a foothold inside the walls. So this player's gonna be sitting here for quite some time. I got some Orc fodder here under Marty Greymantle, by the way. He's commanding this army. A couple units there of the Orc fodder. A lot of Moron infantry as well on his second line. Third line composed of basically uniquely Moron heavy maulers. And he's got some archers of his own. I believe to the tune of about 3 units there. Looks like 3 units of Mordor. Or no, just Moron archers. Got to get out of that habit. A couple units of the Sauron's Will. And 2 units finally of the Black Legion of Barad-dûr. And then commanding the force, we have the Minas Morgul Bodyguard. and some Olokai. I think he's the only force here that has the Olokai. Again, another fairly anomalous unit because the Olokai, of course, were created by Sauron during the Third Age, and there wasn't really the kind of like distinction between trolls that later became, I guess, a lot more prevalent in later ages. But still, I'm sure you guys can ignore that. This is an awesome battle, and that is it for the army comps. So let's go ahead and let's get into the replay. I hope you guys enjoy it. The floodgates have opened, and the iron-shod legions of Morgoth are barreling headlong towards the walls of the fortress of Himring, and it is going to be down to Lango and his hopelessly outnumbered outcompany to try and make them pay dearly for the passage. The Elves of Lindon really need to do a lot of work here in terms of thinning out the horde before they reach the walls, and they have very limited resources to do so. And I, for one, am looking forward to what kind of measures they deem necessary to claim victory in this battle. You can see here, the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, surprisingly enough, the cowardly goblins are going to be among the first to rush towards the elven lines, and they are going to be taking fire all the while. Looks like Alysanne has brought a unit of his Wardens of Harlandon, rather, forward to try and whittle down the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. Meanwhile, big, very daring charge here mounted by Alysanne into the goblin ranks. There are a lot of spears, however, in here in the RAP, and it looks like the Noldoran Horse Lords are going to pay quite dearly for their foolhardiness. Not only is the goblin skirmish line being brought to bear against them, there's also the long pike trait to contend with when charging into spear units, and it's really going to hurt any of your cavalry, or any unit really that decides to do so. Noldoran Horse Lords swooping back, going for, looks like the heavy goblin infantry, but there is another company of spears nearby, so they're going to have to be cognizant of that in order to avoid getting caught out. Looks like the Noldoran objective here is to try and break up the advance of the Misty Mountains as they move forward. If we take a quick look here, we can see that Lango has actually brought 2 or 3 of his units of Elves of Lindon over to his left wing in order to reinforce it, and kind of batten down the hatches on that portion of his line. However, that does leave the right flank woefully undermanned. There's only a couple units here of the Harlandon Guard and a single, very, very much doomed company of Harlandon infantry to hold back the tide. So no doubt, Alysanne is over here to try and lend a little bit of support to this now beleaguered and undermanned right flank. The Noldoran Horse Lords, however, are taking a lot of damage, but hopefully their sacrifice is going to be worth it. So we got some trolls here being brought up by Angstvitz to try and run down those Noldoran Horse Lords. Alysanne is going to fall back now with all the remains of his cavalry, having lost about half of his number in several cycle charges on the Misty Mountain lines. Looks like they're going to... Are they going to rally? Are they going to go back for one last glorious charge against the Snow Trolls? It doesn't look like it. Looks like Alysanne has thought better of it. Now down to less than half of his original number, the Noldoran Horse Lords, looking like they've had enough and they're going to begin to pull back. Over here, however, it looks like some of the Forlindon scouts have been brought to bear, and I believe those are part of Grimgor's army. Wardens of Harlandon running around skirmishing, trying to deal with, looks like the Goblin Band, probably not the best thing to be shooting at, which is, I guess, a good thing because they're not shooting at them anyway. Heavy Goblin Spears, however, are going to stand up to that even better, especially from the front like this. Ah, I see what they're going for. A very well-chosen target indeed by Alysanne. Black Rooks of the Mountain don't have all that much of a shield value, and their armor value is only so-so. So those Mounted Wardens are going to be able to reap a bloody harvest from the ranks of these elite Uruks. Of course, the repositioning of this Harlandon infantry unit has allowed the Misty Mountains to come through in force, although there's really not too much hope for a single unit of Harlandon infantry to be able to hold back this massive tide of the Misty Mountains all on their lonesome, but it does, of course, leave some of these Snow Trolls now free to rush in against the Harlandon Guard. There's some cavalry nearby. The Forlindon Scouts, if they get a charge into those Snow Trolls, it could cut down quite a lot of them, although an uphill charge, less than ideal. Charge from the rear there. Ooh. I don't think they managed to claim the lives of any of those Snow Trolls. The Snow Trolls managed to rally, turn around, and countercharge the Forlindon Scouts, and they're going to find themselves woefully overmatched in a close-quartered battle with those Snow Trolls. Snow Trolls haven't lost, I believe, a single one of their number, and those Elven Cavalry really paid for it. Nice downhill charge here by the Forlindon Scouts into the Black Rooks of the Mountain. And this is really an important unit for the Misty Mountains, so ultimately, I think the amount of attention being paid to gunning these guys down or running them down with cavalry is ultimately going to pay off in the late game. Take a quick look here, get down and dirty with the Harlandon infantry as they try and hold back the orcs of the Misty Mountains, and they're doing a great job of it. Thanks to Alisan's efforts, the heavy goblin infantry was quite soundly reduced by the efforts of the Lindon horse lords. Snow trolls running around, being an absolute terror. Looks like they're still trying to deal with those Harlandon scouts who've now been reduced to a meager aid. But let's pop on over to the other side of the battlefield where it looks like the main strength of Lango's out-garrison is about to be engaged by the forces of Mordor under Arcturus. A lot of Morin on guard here, a lot of important spear units. Minas Morgul Chosen, very useful keeping the rest of the infantry in line. They do inspire units around them, but they're winded. It looks like the Mordor forces really sprinted all the way across the field in order to get here, and that is going to take its toll on the infantry as they begin to engage the out companies of Lindon, who are fresh at this point. Black Legion of Barad-dûr leading the charge uphill here into a unit of Mithlond pikemen. They might be going for this gap to... actually, this would be a really nice opportunity here. If they can get up here, exploit this gap with a high mass unit like the Black Legion of Barad-dûr, come in from the front against the Lindon pikemen, that unit is effectively surrounded and they could be beaten quite soundly. Otherwise, an entrenched unit like this, especially with a hilltop advantage, not going to be fun for the now winded or tired orcs of Mordor to have to face down on their own. Gundabad looking like they've opted for a little bit more of a careful approach. No, they are actually running the entire way across the field as well. Barrel Whites backing up Orc Fellers and a tide of Orc Marauders making their way towards the walls of the Citadel. Well, let's see how things are going for the weakened right flank. Have they managed to take down any of these trolls yet? It does not look like it. Meanwhile, these snow trolls are running amok in the back lines here for the Elves of Lindon. These Harlandon Guard just not able to do what they need to do. Meanwhile, it looks like this company of Harlandon Guard has been committed to the support of the Harlandon infantry, but of course they are quite separated here by an advance from the Black Urooks of the mountain, and the Black Urooks are going to win this fight. I would say they have a very solid chance, even uphill, against the Elves of Lindon of winning that fight. There's a very strong elite unit, stronger than you would expect from an infantry unit from the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. Arrows flying overhead, claiming the lives of who knows how many Elves and Orcs. Meanwhile, the Harlandon infantry holding the line here. The Goblin infantry have lost surprisingly not much. They are beginning to waver. We could see some routing here from the Goblins of the Misty Mountains unless they bring in some of their more substantial units that are able to inspire, and I don't think they have any nearby. No, indeed, all they have is the Goblin King's bodyguard. The rest of it is just rank-and-file units. The Uruk Fearmongers do not inspire as of this hotfix. So we could see some breaking here on the part of the Misty Mountains. Ooh, another charge here from the Noldor Horse Lords into the Goblin heavy infantry. I was going to claim many of those Goblin lives. Let's turn things up just a little bit here and pop back on over to the left wing. Looks like battle has not quite been engaged yet. Forces of Mordor are waiting until they have sufficient strength in order to launch their attack here on the Elven left. And it looks like we got here just in time. A general charge from the forces of Mordor. We have Sauron's Will, tired Sauron's Will, however, being backed up with some Morin on guard. The Elves are going to respond to this movement with a volley of deadly arrows, many of which found their mark here, and we can see a lot of these Morin on guard beginning to fall. Ooh, Sauron's Will getting dangerously close to the Elven lines, and it looks like they kind of thought better of it. Something of almost a disorganized push here. Although I guess this is what you would expect from the Orcs of Mordor, not necessarily known for their high training. Oh, looks like we got the Black Legion of Barad-dûr muscling their way into that gap. The Elves of Lindon are going to fill it with their Harlandon infantry, but you can see units just being tossed up in the air by the mighty mass of these Black Legion of Barad-dûr. They're actually kind of knocking over their own units at the same time as well. And if you guys have seen my my survival guide video, this is exactly one of the tactics that I laid down in there. This is the concentration of force, pushing their way through only a certain part of the Elven line, breaking it up with overwhelming force, rather than trying to engage the length and breadth of their forces. Really nice tactical play here on the part of the Mordor player Arcturus. And look at that, the Black Legion muscling their way in. And these Mithlon pikemen, just as predicted, are going to find themselves surrounded on all sides. A unit of trolls being applied at the pressure point here. I think they might be going for the Mithlon pikemen, or they're going to try and muscle their way through here with the rest of the heavy Orcish infantry. And the Black Legion drive ever further into the Elves of Lindon. Bodies flying everywhere in the face of that inexorable advance. And the Elves of Lindon still says victory is certain for them. Very, very thick at this point in the line. Though the Black Legion of Baradur are sure to thin that out. Looks like they are finding themselves a little bit surrounded here, and this is definitely one of the dangers of using your heavy mass units in this way, is that they can push forward a very long way, but they can also find themselves surrounded just as easily. Got some Harlandon Guard here reforming. I believe they're going to be getting to put a little bit of counter fire into the massive skirmish line here from, I believe, both Mordor and the Orcs of Gundabad. A lot of Snogga archers down here, and some Moranon archers as well. All things considered, this is exactly the kind of way that I would expect people to play in this kind of situation. So hats off to both Arcturus and to Warlango, who's doing his best here in a tough spot. Over on this end, it looks like the out companies on the right have finally been exterminated. The Noldor and Horse Lords looking like maybe they fell apart here. No, that's the Four Lindon scouts. I think there's still a few Noldor and Horse Lords lying dead on the battlefield somewhere, but the right has thoroughly been obliterated, and it looks like Alisan still has managed to hang on to a handful of those Noldoran warriors, and he's going to be falling back with all due haste as the Orcs of Mordor and the Orcs of the Misty Mountains are hot on his heels. Over on this end, now that the right flank has been cleaned up, it looks to me like the Elves of Lindon are in danger of being encircled. Warlango, I suppose, always knew that this was an eventuality, something that was probably going to come to pass. But it looks like he's really made Mordor pay for it. You can see a lot of dead orcs on the ground, at least as many as there are the Elves of Lindon. As the arrow fire continues to pour in, things are looking grim for the valiant out companies. There is no hope for them at this point, although it looks like Warlango has actually brought some of his Wardens of Elas Tyrian to bear in a very intelligent way. Those Mordor forces, and I think this is going to account for a lot of the kills here, extremely exposed up here on this hill. Actually, we're seeing some breaking here. Even the Black Legion are thinking about running away. And that enfilading fire from that unit of Wardens of Elas Tyrian with the body piercing that they have, that is going to be deadly. And I think a lot of the dead orcs here are because of that well-placed unit of Rangers. Really nicely played there on the part of Lango. Snow Trolls now very tired, charging into the Mithlon pikemen who have been arranged in a spear wall formation to try and defend the rear of the Four Lindon pikes and the Harlandon infantry. Although speaking of positioning, you got to hand it to the Mordor player here as well. The way that they have maneuvered the Elves of Lindon while fighting their forces has actually left their rear exposed to that mass volley fire, and of course the fire from their catapults as well. Ooh, is that going to hit those Wardens of Elas Tyrian? Don't think so. Ooh, these ones might though. Oh, very close there. That was a near thing for those Harlandon infantry. Still have a company of Wardens of Harlandon out in the field under Alisan, and Mordor under Arcturus. They're really looking worse for wear. I love their aggressive play. They had the right idea for sure. But the Elves of Lindon are no joke in melee, especially in this kind of grind where they can bring all of their units together in a united front against your army. That's the kind of fighting that the Elves of Lindon are best at. Still surprising amount of elves here, despite the pincer movement from the forces of Thangorodrim. Another push here by the Orcs of Gundabad, already very tired, and you know what, I think the fatigue really played a big part in this battle. Running their forces all the way across the map, of course, got them in the battle a little bit sooner, and they were able to, I think they were able to catch the forces of Lindon more or less between a pincer movement, but Lindon was ready for them in any case. They had the time that they needed because of the distance between them and the attackers to move any reinforcements they deemed necessary to the left, giving up more or less on the right flank entirely. And that preparation served them in good stead. And the fatigue of the Orcish forces as they moved across the field really told against them. Fresh elves versus exhausted orcs is going to go to the elves every time. Oh man, just look at the amount of arrows pouring in here. Harlan on guard standing up to it fairly well. Especially because of those the 5 shield value that they have available to them. But they are slowly being ground down. And the Out companies, somehow managing to stand firm, are now taking on the forces of Gundabad. I believe the Misty Mountains were in there as well. And they're coming out victorious. Let's see if there's any more reinforcements on the way. A lot of orc marauders here. Some of them now beginning to move forward. These ones only warmed up, so I imagine they're going to have a much better opportunity to cut down some of those orcs than their tired brethren. Looks like Alissan just lost his general. Círdan has now fallen to a couple of mountain trolls over here who managed to hack their way through 3 or 4 of the remaining Noldoran horse lords, which is pretty impressive. Man, I'm just loving this fight. And it looks like maybe the elves of Lindon are being allowed to retreat, surprisingly enough, as the Out companies, in the face of overwhelming Orcish force, are beginning to fall back towards the walls of the hill of Himring. Meanwhile, Alissan has brought a unit of Harlanon infantry quite far forward, possibly to act as a vanguard for the remaining Out companies as they begin what appears to indeed be a flight towards friendly lines. Wardens of Harlanon now tired, looking like they're targeting some of the heavy goblin infantry, now exhausted from their extended fight against the Harlanon infantry of the Out companies. Beautiful Lancer charge there into those goblin heavy infantry. Really going to do a lot of damage. Meanwhile, the goblin skirmishers trying to pepper down the Forlanon pikemen and the Harlanon infantry, and they seem to be having some success. The Forlanon pikemen with their light armor still managing to be focused down, despite the presence of the supporting company of Harlanon infantry who are trying to block those missiles for them. Looks like things on the right wing are going to start to kick off real soon. Yeah, we have the Out companies here chasing some of the goblin bands straight through the lines. Actually, Grimgor Ironhide has now brought forward some of his own infantry to form a second line here in order to give the Out companies an opportunity to flee with all of their remaining strength. Now let's see exactly what happened up here in this hill. Look at this. A bloody battlefield indeed. Elves and orcs dead by the hundreds on both sides. There's a few units of Harlanon Guard here I think are just broke in the face of overwhelming Orcish forces. They're going to now begin to flee towards who knows. I don't think there's actually a town square in this scenario, so we won't be seeing them reform, I don't believe. And now Mordor, Sereg here, along with the Orcs of Gundabad, are going to be able to be free to take the fight to the Elves of Lindon and possibly catch some of the Out companies before they are able to flee behind the safety of the barrier that the Harlanon infantry have erected here. Mordor infantry not having a whole lot of luck pushing their way through the Harlanon infantry. To be expected, the Harlanon infantry definitely a tier or 2 above an Orcish infantry unit that is understrength and tired. Exhausted company of Sauron's Will looking like they want a nice flank charge here. Ward Lango's still trying to get some of his Harlanon infantry out of there, and unfortunately some of these survivors are going to get caught up by the Mordor infantry, and that's going to be all she wrote for them. Charge here by the Sauron's Will into the Harlanon Guard as Alissan begins to fall back towards the rest of his allies' army. Some really nice tactics here on the part of the High Elven players. Alissan did not stay in there a moment longer than what he needed to with his Harlanon infantry, and this is the kind of gameplay that really leads itself to a defender victory. Oftentimes, I mean, we're all familiar with the phrase, defenders never win. Well, sometimes they do, and a lot of it is thanks to smart decision-making all the way along the line. I think that's what we're seeing here. Mordor infantry now charging into a pike block of Mithlon pikemen backed up with Harlanon infantry. And yet more support here coming from Warlango's Mithlon pikemen. So the Mithlon pikemen are doubling up. This is not going to be an easy line for the forces of Morgoth to push through. Let's pop back over to the other side, and it looks like things are not going quite as well for the Elves of Lindon. They have actually pushed forward a little bit here, and while they are beating the goblin infantry, there's a lot of goblins yet to come, and they are giving up their superior positioning in order to push out here like this. So it does lend itself to having these infantry surrounded. So we'll see what the orcs of the Misty Mountains here do with this minor mistake here from the Elves of Lindon. Meanwhile, now this is the fight I'm sure that you're all really hungry to see. Gundabad orcs, along with the orcs from Mordor, fighting together, trying to break their way through this elven Thangale. The Elves of Lindon are not going to be giving up this position very easily. Not only is it very strategically important that they hold these choke points and deal as much damage as possible before the orcs of Morgoth can push their way through. These are the Noldor in their prime. They are fearless, they are deadly, and the orcs have no idea what is coming for them. Another company here of Mithlond pikemen moving in to reinforce a weaker portion of the line. There's a lot of Mithlond pikemen. I don't think I've ever seen quite so many in one place before. And another supporting company here of Harlan infantry from Alisan is going to ensure that the orcs of Gundabad and Mordor are not going to be getting through here in any hurry at all. Popping on over to this end, the skirmishers that both Sarek and the orcs of the Misty Mountains can bring to bear are going to do very well, I think, in a situation like this. A lot of those skirmishers are AP. Those crossbows especially are going to be very deadly for units like the Harlandon infantry. So we've got some Mithlond Marines in the back there tossing their javelin payloads into the orcish left flank. At the same time, the orcs of the Misty Mountains moving forward with a fresh company of spears in shield wall formation to try and break their way through this very, very lightly defended elven right wing. And it looks like they are going to be extremely successful in that endeavor, managing to break through the elven lines. And this can very quickly cascade into disaster if the Elves of Lindon are not careful. Another volley of javelins moving in. You can see a lot of orcs falling there, but it's not enough. The tide is seemingly unending. The Mount Uruk blades now backing up the push from those heavy goblin spears. Good tactics here on the part of the Misty Mountains. They saw an opportunity, and now they are going for the jugular, pushing their way through this now broken elven right wing. And unless reinforcements are forthcoming, like the Noldor Guard, for example, the elves are going to find themselves very, very much in a bind. But the Noldor Guard were not committed to the fray quickly enough, and now not the Elves of Lindon, the Orcs of Mordor and Misty Mountains will be able to continue their push against the elven lines here, rolling them up while they hold off the rest of the reinforcements of the Noldoran Guard with their infantry. Oh man, this heavy goblin spear is really driving hard into the Noldoran Guard. A risky proposition, as the Noldoran Guard are a little bit higher mass than a lot of the other elven units, with 1.4 instead of the regular 0.7 that many of the units have. And they've also got really high attack as well. Meanwhile, the goblin spears don't have the highest melee defense. You can see them really starting to take some losses there from the Noldoran Guard. You know, the Noldoran Guard not taking nearly as many in return. They are getting knocked over, but they get back up again. Can't keep them down. Let's pop back on over to the other choke point. It is absolute bedlam here. Arrows flying in from both sides, trying to thin out the enemy numbers to allow their side the advantage. Some spearmen here, some Mordor spearmen have been brought to bear, and you can see them trying to muscle their way through this pike block here from the Elves of Mithlond. There's not nearly as many Harlandon infantry left in there, I don't believe. A lot of them have fallen on the front lines, and that's going to leave the Elves of Mithlond to pick up the slack. Some reinforcements of Harlandon infantry being brought in to try and counter this massive push here by the orcs, but you can see that line beginning to thin out as the orcs muscle their way through. Hopefully the Elves of Lindon won't make the same mistake they made on the other end, and will move in reinforcements as quickly as possible to that side of the battle. And it looks like a desperation move here on the part of Warlango, moving in with his Wardens of Elastirion. I think they still had ammunition. I believe they had their bows out. So possibly not the best use of this ranger unit, but desperate times call for desperate measures after all. The Harlandon Guard now moving forward, getting themselves in a position where they can quickly reinforce the infantry fight. And looks like they're going to be charging in there as well, alongside the Wardens of Elos Tyrion, to try and hold the wall. Noldoran Guard now being committed to the fray as well. You can see bodies flying in the air as elves and orcs shove their way in, trying to block their enemies from thwarting their plans here. More and more of the orcs are looking like these are from Gundabad, surging forward, trying to bust their way through. You can see that the elves of Lindon have really ballooned on this side, although it seems like maybe we're going to get a lot of routing here from the orcs of Mordor and Gundabad, and that could put a halt to their offensive here really quickly if that cascades into a chain rout. It seems that the elves of Lindon now have that well and truly in hand. A commitment here from the Mithlon Swordmaster, I think, is going to seal the fate of this push. Now with those fire arrows moving in, ooh, we might see a massive rout here on the part of Morgoth's orcs. Not the most courageous of monsters, even on a good day, and now, when they are very much on the back foot, I don't think they're going to be able to stand up to the might of the Elves of Lindon for too much longer. It's a lot of fire arrows going in there, and we can see a lot of breaking now, and some shaken units, and some that are wavering from the orcs. We'll come back to things on that side. Let's see how it's going over here. Oh my goodness. Morgoth's orcs have really had a lot of success here, managing to just burst another hole in the line. Looks like some of the Black Legion of Mordor have managed to push their way through here, and this is anything but a coherent defense for the Elves of Lindon. You can see just pockets of Elven infantry surrounded, none worse off than these Harlandon infantry on the front lines. Now with these heavily armored trolls bursting their way in, I think we can see these Harlandon infantry begin to break and flee. Meanwhile, we know the Noldoran Guard will hold the line, but they are also being bent backwards by the push here from the Orcish infantry. And they're going to quickly find themselves surrounded as well. Got some breaking yet? Nope. It won't be too much longer, I don't think. Black Legion of Barad-dûr now running into a bit of a nightmare here. The Blade Masters, the Noldoran Blade Masters of Lindon, more than a match for a unit like this. Even being able to push through, they're just going to find themselves surrounded on all sides by the deadly curved two-handed blades of those elite Noldor warriors. Black Legion of Barad-dûr on this end not really having nearly as much luck. It looks like the Elves of Lindon have managed to halt the advance of the Orcish forces on this wing as well. Let's push over to this end. Oh yeah, look at that rout. Hundreds upon hundreds of the orcs fleeing in the face of the wrath of the Noldor. Very unfortunate for the Orcish players, but of course, they have reserves. They have a lot of reserves, and they have their elite companies as well yet to come. Although, to be fair, they are significantly reduced. Take a look at the percentages there. Surprisingly enough, the percentage is nearly dead even. So the Elves of Lindon managing to stand firm, but they're looking quite battered at this point. It is less of a coherent formation of pike blocks being supported by infantry and more of a motley crew that was committed at the last moment to try and counter a great push from Morgoth's warriors. But still, a lot of elves in reserves. Yeah, a lot of deadly elven warriors yet to come. Looks like Grimgor Ironhide is now bringing out some of his forces. And it's going to be all that the orcs of Mordor can do to push their way through here. And remember, once they manage to get through, they get a full, fresh, reinforcing army. So the Elves of Lindon definitely need to be worried about that. If those Mordor forces come in from behind them while they're being pressed from this end by the orcs of Gundabad and their allies. Ooh, that could be real nasty. Let's see here, with gaps still open in the Elven defense on the right wing. The Mordor heavy hitters, Mount Uruk Blades, some Morgul's Chosen, and, my goodness, the Melkor's Chosen as well, are going to be pushing their way through. And if the Melkor's Chosen come through on this end, where there are only Noldoran Blade Masters and the Harlandon infantry, they're going to have no problem breaking through those lines at all and slaughtering those Noldor Blade Masters with rear charges. There are no spearmen on that end. Most of the Harlandon Guard have been committed on the right alongside Harlandon archers and some Harlandon infantry as well. So there is no defense from cavalry, and it looks like the Melkor's Chosen are going to be taking advantage of this fact. Olokai and Melkor's Chosen now battering down the valiant Noldor Blade Masters. Some reinforcements, some Lindon pikemen, and a fresh company of Noldoran Guard from Alisan moving in to try and seal this breach. But it looks like the damage has been done. The Melkor's Chosen now well and truly through the lines. Oh, and they're going to have their pick of the litter in terms of what they want to run down. I think they're going to be going after the Elven Archers. First thing, first thing. Definitely the choice that I would make in this kind of situation. Melkor's Chosen, a devastating charge there into the massed ranks of the Forlorn Archers. They are really going to just get bisected there by that vicious charge. As Melkor's Chosen looking like they're going to pull out now, possibly go for a rear charge against the Harlandon Guard. Try and whittle down the Elven forces on the right, which is going to allow the forces of Mordor to break in well and truly. Let's see what we got going on over here. It looks like, for the purposes of gameplay, the Orcish forces are considered as having broken through the walls. So it looks like Marty Greymantle is going to be bringing his Olokai to bear against the Elven artillery piece. Now, I don't know if the breaking through the right is enough in order to trigger that rule, or if Marty Greymantle is kind of jumping the gun a little bit here. Maybe he is, since he is pulling his Olokai out. So we might not see any movement here on the part of the rest of the Orcish infantry, but there are some Orc fodder moving forward, so you know what? Maybe Marty Greymantle and his Mordor army are in the fight well and truly at this point. But that catapult really has nowhere to go. There are no nearby supporting units that can get in there quickly enough before the Olokai manage to massacre them, so that is a great leg up there for the forces of Morgoth. Oh, let's pop back over to this side. Looks like the catapult from the Orcs of Gundabad move forward to try and burst some holes in the lines. But the Elven Archers, surprisingly enough with their fire arrows, you don't see this very often. They managed to light those catapults on fire. 2 out of 3 catapults now ablaze. And that's going to be all she wrote for these catapults. They're just going to fall apart. Let's see if this one remaining piece of artillery manages to get a shot off here into those Mithlon Blade Masters. Maybe? Nope, it is now lit on fire as well, and that is all she wrote for the attacking artillery. Very unfortunate. Didn't even have a chance, I think, to get a single shot off. So while the Elves have lost their artillery, so have the attackers. Not going to confer an advantage to either side. Ooh, I kind of like this. I kind of like that through the haze right there. Definitely taking a cheeky screenshot of that. Meanwhile, in terms of the balance of power on the left wing, it seems like the Elves of Lindon are really beginning to lose steam. Now the Blackwatch Legion have been brought to bear. We've got the Dismounted Temple Inquisitors moving in as well, along with those Trolls of Gundabad. They are going to be enough, I think, to hack their way through even these hundreds of Mithlon Swordmasters who stand ready in the defense of Himring. Let's see what's going on over on Marty Greymantle's side of things. Mordor infantry and the Black Legion now storming into the city. All the defenses have been breached now, as the Elves of Lindon, I believe, are in the process of being broken on the left and have been thoroughly driven back on the right. This company of Noldoran Guard under Alisan valiantly selling their lives dearly against the overwhelming might of Morgoth. Let's take a look at their percentages there. Very, very even. So far, even with the massive numerical advantage that the Orcs have over the Elves, I gotta say, this is a finely balanced scenario. Great job to Alisan in that regard. Orlango now falling back with his Noldoran Blade Masters. Alisan trying to get his Wardens of Elostirion out of there as quickly as possible. Most of the Elves of Lindon that are still remaining standing in the lower levels of the fortress are now falling back to the upper level. The second, or I suppose third and final set of defenses against Morgoth's legions. What do we got up here? It looks like Melkor's Chosen going uphill for some reason. I don't know. Maybe there's a hidden unit of rangers up here, or they know something that I don't. Otherwise, it does seem a little bit strange. Perhaps this is just the general from the Morgoth forces.
Our general lies
Oop, somebody's elven general just fell. I believe that's Lango's general. But perhaps it's the general for the Melkor's forces climbing up into this hill to survey his conquest of the city. Definitely feeling confident at this point, I can only assume. Meanwhile, the left wing still stands, but for how much longer? The Mithlond Swordmasters definitely going to be defeated here. You can see some more Gundabad elites charging into the fray to back up that Black Watch Legion unit. Hammerers of Gundabad are going to cut their way through the Harlandon Guard and the remaining Mithlond Swordmasters. Looks like we have a unit here that is very much in danger of routing. Yeah, those Harlandon Guard, I'm thinking that maybe they might want to start fleeing. Now Broken, fighting to the death. That's not going to do anything for the morale of the Mithlond Swordmasters. You can see it begin to take a dip as they are overwhelmed on the flanks by the Orcs of Gundabad and the Trolls of Gundabad. These elite Blade Masters are soon to be no more.
Our men have fought long and are becoming tired.
Let's see what we got down here. A small outnumbered company of Harlandon Guard fighting against the Mountain Orc Berserkers, trying to hold the line, I presume, to give the rest of the Elven forces the opportunity to retreat. And you can see a nearly fresh company here of Harlandon Guard from Alisan, still with their ammunition and full numbers, making their way back up here towards the defenses. And the Elves have a fair amount going for them at this point. 3 companies of Wardens of Elas Tyrion in a choke point is an amazing boon to have, especially in a wide open position like this where they can just simply be stuck on the approaches here to the ramps. Oh man, they'll be able to rack up an insane amount of kills with that BP. Some Mithlond Swordmasters from Alisan looking like they are a little bit battered. Took some light casualties in defense of the choke points, but still managing to remain fairly healthy. Although for how much longer? It looks like Marty Greymantle charging in there with his Olokai. Looks like he wants to get a piece of those Mithlond Swordmasters, although with all the Elven forces nearby to support them, probably not the best use of one's Olokai. Let's see what we got here. The left has been breached. Let's take a quick overview. Ooh, hold on, let's get down in there. Watch these forces cheer. Another nice little screenshot for us. Let's take a quick stock of the remaining attacking forces. We've got about 40% of their forces. The defenders have actually pulled ahead by 5%. Not bad at all. So got some Witch Realm Pikemen, Mordor Archers. Oh my goodness. The Witch Realm Blackguard have not even been engaged yet. Got some Mordor Halberds here, some Minas Morgul Bodyguard, Goblin King's Bodyguard, and of course the Blackback Berserkers. So the attackers are still very much in this, despite their horrendous losses that they have suffered pushing through these choke points. What do we got here? This is the last stand of the Noldoran Guard. Oh, we need to see this. Absolutely fearless. The best of the best of the Noldoran garrison, selling their lives dearly here in a wonderful last stand. Be interesting to see just how many kills the Noldoran Guard managed to get in this battle. Let's kick things into normal speed. Witness this wonderful last stand. Pretty damned awesome, but I think there's a little bit of action over here. The Olokai have now charged in to the lines of the Elves of Lindon. Looks like most of them have been pulled back. But they are getting a fair amount of kills here. Surprisingly enough, there's a lot of Elves of Lindon lying face down in a pool of their own blood on this rampart. And now, the Mordor player is moving in with his first wave. Some Orc fodder. Not really going to do too much, although I think they have Shield Wall. If they don't, they will definitely be getting Shield Wall. And they're going to be moving forward to try and push their way through the Elves of Mithlond. Or the Elves of Lindon, I should say. Wear them down a little bit in preparation for the more heavy-hitting Orcish infantry to get themselves into position. Those Orcs now colliding with the lines. The Elves of Mithlond already very clearly have an advantage here over these weak, poorly armed and trained Orcish units. Ooh, another Orc falls. Another minor victory for the Elves of Lindon. Let's see what we got here. Some Witch Realm Hammerguard now moving in to try and support the advance of the Orcish fodder and the ragtag survivors of that choke point battle. Mordor Archers from Sereg. Witch Realm Scourge Raiders still looking pretty strong, about half strength there. A lot of pikemen here are going to be very useful. Those high mass units for pushing their way through the remaining Elves of Lindon. Let's see what we got over on this end. Many of the orcs of the Misty Mountains moving their way forward. And let's see. We just missed it. The remaining Noldoran Guard crushed by what looks like a rear charge from the Milk Horse Chosen. And the outer defenses have fallen indeed. Let's see what we got here. He's going to be leading the way. Some heavy goblin archers, probably out of ammunition. Indeed. Backed up with some Mordor archers who still have their bows. White Uruk Fearmongers, really heavily reduced in that one unit. This one's still pretty healthy. More Mountain Orc Berserkers. And of course, the heavy hitters, the Goblin King's Bodyguard and the Minas Morgul Bodyguard as well. Let's move on over to this end. It looks like the pressure has been put on the Elven left once again, but it is standing firm. Look at that. There's still a lot of infantry in there. I think there's a couple units of Harlan infantry backing up 1 or 2 units of the Mithlon pikemen. This is again going to be a slaughterhouse for the orcs to try and muscle their way through. More and more orcs pouring in. Meanwhile, look at this. Those elves positioned on the flank here, they're going to be able to reap a terrible toll from the ranks of the orcs of Gundabad and Mordor. Beautiful enfilading fire here. You can see a lot of orcs beginning to drop. So this is evenly matched, but a little bit closer to the front lines. You can see a lot of these exhausted troops are just not having a great time against the elves of Lindon. I love it. Look at that officer there fighting on the front lines now, taking on one of the Blackwatch Legion. Blackwatch Legion wasn't having any of it, just pushing his way straight through there, ignoring that officer. Yeah, it's really good up close and personal there. The officer's pushing a little bit farther forward, risking getting hacked down by those Witch Realm Hammer Guardians. Oh, that poor officer getting stabbed to death with a blunt object and having his head knocked off like a golf ball by that massive hammer. More and more orcs pouring in against the final defenses here of the Elves of Lindon. You can see companies of Noldoran Guard being committed now to hold back the tide. And this is going to be, it's going to be an even fight. It's still very even. Only 3% difference here in favor of the attackers. Looking like a little bit more of a cautious approach here. The orcs of Arturos showering the Lindon lines with fire arrows, trying to thin them out before they begin to move in with their, I would say, more meager forces. They definitely took a lot of damage on this side, both from Alison's cavalry and the stand of the out companies on the right, but also trying to push their way through this this choke point. There's a lot of dead orcs there, and they really don't seem to have quite as much available to them. They do certainly have some heavy hitting elite units though, so they've definitely got a chance to muscle their way through the Elves of Lindon on their right, especially since so many of the reinforcements have been now shifted towards the left. There's really not much here. The seemingly perennially anemic Elven right flank, and the attackers are definitely going to take advantage of that if they can. Moving back to this end, you can see the archers just pouring fire in there. A lot of lag as well, as more and more units just muscle their way into this choke point. It becomes a massive, ever-increasing blob. More Elven reinforcements now being committed as the Elves of Lindon begin to balloon a little bit, thanks to the pressure from the Blackwatch Legion and the Olokai. Let's get right down and dirty with it. I know you guys love that. A little bit of counter-fire coming in from the Orcish ranged companies, but nothing near the withering hail of arrows that the Elves of Lindon can lay down and have been into this Orcish flank. Look at this. So many of these units cut down before they can even reach the front lines. Especially units like these heavy maulers who don't have any shields and only have decent heavy armor. That's really going to be a big problem for them. Nonetheless, with uncharacteristic courage, the orcs of Morgoth push their way forward. Though perhaps it's not courage, maybe it's more fear of their ruthless taskmaster, the Dark Lord himself, that drives them forward, throwing away their lives in repeated assaults on the Elven lines. Meanwhile, the elves of Lindon fight for more than just fear. They fight for their homes and the preservation of their people and their way of life. 75 to 75. Dead even at this late point in the battle. Usually, at this late point in a siege or a siege-like scenario, you start to see a victor kind of emerge on the horizon, but it really seems like it's anybody's game at this point. Noldoran Guard now being pulled out, and I think they're being committed to the right flank, which is now under heavy assault by the forces of Morgoth. Those Trolls of Gundabad being used once again to batter their way through the phalanxes and ordered formations of the Elves of Lindon. A very nicely placed unit of Wardens of Elastirion firing downwards into the Orcs. There's a lot of lightly armored units down here, like the lightly armored and unshielded, I should say, units like the Pikes and like those Mountain Orc Berserkers, and of course the Mordor Archers. It seems like, yeah, the advantage is definitely being given by the game, and certainly in my mind as well, to the forces of Morgoth as they begin to crush here the center of the Elves of Lindon's formation. And now it looks like the Blackback Mountain Berserkers are going to be holding up a lot of these reinforcements. This is definitely a deployment problem, I think, on the part of Grimgor Ironhide. There's no need to try and fight these Blackback Berserkers in a massive blob like this. You could definitely go around them with at least one company of the Noldor Guard, and of course the Harlandon Guard as well, and try and stick a cork in the breach that the forces of Morgoth have made in the center of the Lindon formation. That's definitely more important, I think, than fighting a small, outnumbered group of Berserkers. Harlandon Guard now charging in to try and seal the breach and hold on for as long as possible. Take a look at the percentages there. Still nearly dead even, 1% difference. I gotta say, this is probably one of the better balanced, large-scale scenarios that I have seen thus far. Temple Inquisitors now being brought to bear against the Elven lines. More and more reinforcements moving in, and the Melkor's Chosen looking like they're going to try and muscle their way through a weak point in the line and go for some rear charges. Although there's a lot of spears this time around, so I don't think they're going to have the same success that they did at the right wing's choke point. Nonetheless, they are going to try. I think those Melkor's Chosen might find themselves a little bit overmatched at this point. Although this line here, it is thinning out. Maybe they're going to have their opportunity. Let's find out. Ooh, one of those Minimum Pikemen about to have a very bad day as he gets hacked to bits by one of the heavy maulers. Ooh, those heavily armored Numenorians. A little bit ahistorical, but nonetheless deadly for their anomalous appearance out here in the First Age. Hacking down a number of the Elves of Lindon before they are retreated by their commander. I think they've lost a couple of their units there in that exchange. A now nearly fresh unit of Noldoran Blade Masters being committed to the right, I think, is going to be enough to seal the fate of this Orcish offensive. And it doesn't seem like they have a lot of reserves left. This is basically the entirety of the strength remaining to the forces of Morgoth on the right. So let's go ahead and let's see how things are going on the left. It seems like they've turned around a little bit. Though the Orcish forces are finding themselves in a similar position to what happened with the Out Companies, where they push very far forward, balloon a certain portion of the Elven line, but ultimately find themselves surrounded. Still, this grinding fight moves ever onward, as warriors from both sides fall, contributing to the massive body count in this battle so far. 87 to 87, still dead even. Let's take a quick look here at what the forces of Mordor still have remaining to them. A lot of infantry, and you know what? I think a lot of the archer companies, yeah, like the Wardens of Elastirion, are out of ammunition. Have now been committed to melee, which means that they're not going to be able to just endlessly shoot down the Orcish forces. So the Elves of Lindon are going to have to hack their way through every single orc that you see remaining on the field here. And it looks like the Mordor forces still have skirmishers yet to come as well. So The Elves of Lindon have put up a valiant defense so far, but I think this is where we're going to start to see it swing in favor of the attackers. I see just staggering amount of numbers that Morgoth's legions were able to bring to bear begin to slowly take their toll on the outnumbered elves. It's just a tangled mess here on the front lines of dead bodies, pikes, spears, swordsmen stabbing wildly this way and that. More and more orcs pouring in there. It seems like a bit of a stalemate. Just a bloody, bloody stalemate. On the right, however, I don't know. Looks like they are slowly managing, they being the attackers, slowly managing to push their way through here. And now that the dismounted Temple Inquisitors have come into contact with the Noldor and Blade Masters, oh man, we're going to have a fight here worthy of song. Those are two of, in my opinion, the best shock units in the game. The Noldor and Blade Masters with their 2 HP and massive, massive damage pools. And of course the Temple Inquisitors, who strike a fine balance between offensive capabilities and defensive stats with their plate armor. It's looking like an excellent fight here. Oh, that one guy looks like one of those Temple Inquisitors got attacked on all sides at the same time. It was just whirling around, trying to defend himself from the deadly strokes of the Noldor and Blade Masters. Let's see who's going to win this fight. It's hard to tell at this point. The Noldor and Blade Masters have taken significantly less casualties, however, and I think now with the addition of the Blackback Mountains Berserkers pushing their way through the lines and being able to surround the Noldor, maybe things are going to start to turn around. A significant amount of those Blackbacks actually managed to make it through the line there. I'm surprised by that. Get out there. We still got some Wardens of Elest here, and I think now would be a good time for Grimoire to pull these guys back since they seem to be winning on that end, and to bring them over here and try and thin out this Orcish horde, which seems to be getting the better of the remaining Elves of Lindon garrison. Ooh, somebody's general just got hacked down in melee with the Temple Inquisitors and the Blackback Berserkers. I would assume that was Grimgore's general, since I believe the Noldor and Blade Masters are in that fight, and that is definitely a general's bodyguard unit. So we got the Witch Realm Blackguard who have been fighting up here as well. Didn't see them. The Noldor and Blade Masters, however, are ready to take on all comers. Although this is disastrous. What do we have here? Melkor's Chosen, very heavily reduced, very tired, and no doubt wounded. But still, they've managed to make their way through the Elven lines. And speaking of, the cork has been blown off this particular bottle of wine, and now the orcs of Mordor are going to be able to muscle their way through in force for the most part. And there's really nothing left that the Elves of Lindon have to throw into that battle. So the Melkor's Chosen now getting a beautiful charge here into the Wardens of Elastirion, hacking them down. You can see them just flying this way and that, landing on the ground, stark dead. Some of them are getting back up. That was a very, very vicious charge there that cost them, I think, about a quarter of the remaining unit. Noldoran Guard here. Fittingly, the Noldoran Guard and the Noldoran Blade Masters are the last ones standing on the right flank. And it's taken them a surprising amount of time, actually, to cut their way through the remaining Orcish forces. There's just a lot of HP in there, a lot of fairly decent units with high defensive stats, like the Gundabad Guard, for example, and of course the Morgul Chosen. It's not quite the blowout in favor of the defenders as I thought it was going to be, and that's really unfortunate for the Elves of Lindon, because if they were able to destroy the offensive on the right here and move quickly to reinforce their allies on the left, they might have been able to prevent this breach from happening. Melkor's Chosen getting a nice hammer and anvil strike into the Mithlon Sword Masters, into the Wardens of Elastirion. The Elves of Lindon not going to be able to stand up to that for too much longer. Although admittedly, the Melkor's Chosen are on their last legs as well, down to a meager 2. Let's take a look at this fight here. Melkor's Chosen circling around back for another attack on the back lines of the Elves of Lindon, claiming the lives of a handful of those elves, but every loss is dearly felt at this late stage in the game. I think that is going to be all she wrote here. 96 to 92. The defenders at a 4% disadvantage, and at this late portion of the game, every percent counts, and I think it's a foregone conclusion now that the attackers are going to take this fight. And looks like, surprisingly enough, on the right, the Elves of Lindon are beginning to lose. Now that they are losing in every section of the battle, I think that's going to be all she wrote. There's really no coming back for it at this point. They've reached that critical mass of losses. The Mordor archers charging into the citadel. Charging through the walls. We'll just say that they're eager for plunder, and the Wardens of Elastirion are running in after them to stop them from stealing the relics and wealth of their people. A thin white line is all that remains of the left flank as the iron-shod legions of Morgoth charge forward, breaking the line and cutting down all the remains of the Elves of Lindon. 99 to 93. Mordor archers here opening fire on the remaining Wardens of Elastirion under Grimgor Ironhide. And the Noldor Guard and the Lindon Blade Masters are all but spent. I feel comfortable kicking it up into 6 times. Well, maybe not quite 6 times. We'll do 3 times. Slowly but surely, these remaining Noldor are being surrounded and brought down. Small band of Wardens of Elastirion trying to defend the gates of their lord's house. But that's going to be the end. The Hill of Himring has fallen to the Orcs of Morgoth. Despite the best efforts of the Elves of Lindon, only 7% of their enemies remain, but it is enough. And now the Pass of Aglon and the approach to the eastern marches has been blown asunder, and it's going to be down to the remaining Sons of Feanor to try and pick up the slack. So a very, very good game to the Elves of Lindon. That is an impossibly outnumbered situation. They still almost pulled out a victory there. Really well done on the part of the attackers as well. I pointed it out several times throughout the video. They had some great tactics, and it really, while it didn't stop them from taking very heavy losses, that was going to happen anyway. But I think that the skilled gameplay of the attackers is what kept them in the game and ultimately gave them a victory. Obviously, the numbers themselves weren't enough to overcome the Elves of Lindon in this battle. If it was if the attackers were just relying on their numbers alone, they never would have been able to pull out a very narrow victory here. So excellent work to them, and of course, again, a hats off to the defenders as well. Let's take a look here. I want to see what those Wardens of Elastirion got. 1,000 on that unit. Mithlon Pikemen, 558. A lot of really high units here, and I think a lot of them are either the Pike units or the Archers as well. Wow, look at those numbers. 2,500 on the Wardens of Elastirion. That is a disgusting number, but of course, this is ideal conditions for a unit like the Wardens of Elastirion and their body piercing. So a lot of that is, of course, going to be some lower tier Orcish units. Really, really high kill counts here for a lot of these Lindon infantry. 1,300 for the Wardens of Elastirion, for the non-archers with 1,200. Damn, that is beautiful. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the attacker stats. But that is it for the scenario. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you guys are interested in some more historical content, I do have some pretty cool stuff coming out. I'm going to be trying out some narrative battle replays, and that is going to be based around a Gondor versus Umbar series of scenarios. And also, I'm not going to tell you too much about this, since it's not finished, and we've only really just begun some preliminary work on it. Sin of the Dark Cloud and I are working on a Reforged Machinima film, and whether or not that sees the light of day remains to be seen, but we have begun storyboarding, and we have a lot of great ideas and some cool stuff they want to bring to you in regards to that. So some of you guys asked for it, some of you guys really enjoyed the trailer and wanted a Reforged kind of narrative movie, and Sin of the Dark Cloud and I are going to do our best to deliver that to you. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye!